never been married, childless cat ladies. Honestly, that sounds like a dream come true to me. I don't know. Like solitude, my own choices, and animals that love me. Oh my God, somebody, call the cops.
I don't knock anybody's life choices. I just wonder, how do we get to a point where, women are now so proud of, or even men for that matter, are so proud of like just being alone? I mean, I think that it's okay to be alone, but I think this narrative about growing old, never being married, never having children, I understand it's a defense mechanism because people feel like they're being attacked all the time, but as human beings, I think we need to reevaluate what we're here for, because so much of this narrative, if everybody follows this narrative, I don't think humankind can keep going year after year. Birth rates are down everywhere. I'm not saying everybody should have kids, but I think we need to reevaluate this narrative.
I never made it down the aisle, but I have been engaged in the past. How many engagements? I would say 2.5. Let's start with the 0.5 since that was the first one. I was involved with a man who loved me. He was good looking, he was tall, he was charismatic, gregarious. Everybody loved him. My mom loved him, my sister loved him, my niece loved him, my friends loved him. Everybody loved him. But there was something inside of me that just said, this is not perfect. It's the furthest thing from perfect.
It's never perfect. It's never perfect, y'all. Don't look for perfection or else you will be alone. There's no such thing as perfection.
I'd say things like, nobody's ever going to love you the way that I love you. And I believed him. I wrestled with this internal sense of guilt. I wrestled with the guilt of honestly wanting to be free, honestly wanting to live my life and to date and to experience other men and to experience other things and other places. I just wanted to live my life. I had moved to New York from Toronto, a totally different country, with $25, 2 suitcases, and a one-way ticket. I didn't have permission from my country to leave. I didn't have permission from this country to be here. And I was making things happen for myself at a very, very rapid pace. And so to find myself inside of a relationship that felt so stifling at this very young age and not having the vocabulary to speak up for myself and articulate that somebody who loves you would not say those things to you. They wouldn't say that nobody will ever love you the way that I love you.
So I think you receive it depending on whether you want to be with this person or not. How you look at that statement depends on if you want to be with that person. So
that indicates that there's a part of me that's broken or there's a part of me that's unlovable. But I didn't know how to articulate this. So I stayed in this relationship that I was wildly unhappy in for approximately 3.5 years, close to four. And I have to admit, I was not faithful in this relationship. Nothing that I'm proud of, but I just chalk that up to I was really, really young and I was hood famous.
And before we get to that, Donnell Jones has a song called Where I Want to Be. And I always think about that song. I remember when that song came out, I was very young. I was in a relationship in my early 20s. And sometimes you may meet somebody who's good, somebody who would be a good long-term relationship, but you may not want to be faithful. The reality is that homegirl wanted to be out on the streets. She wanted to hit these streets and sleep with other men. Now, does that make her wrong? No. But the whole childless cat lady thing, where I want to get to in this video is to talk about the fact that, particularly when you're talking about engagements, right? So, I mean, I've been married 10 years. I was only engaged one time, right? So I'm not saying it can't happen more than once, but we have all these beautiful, accomplished women. Same thing with Dr. Cheyenne Bryant when she was on Cam Newton's show. Another beautiful woman, early 40s, talking about she's been engaged 3 times. Like, when you start looking at you've been engaged 2, 3 times, engagements don't happen every day. You know what I'm saying? If they are happening every day to the same person, if you have been engaged 5 times, 6 times, then you probably aren't having deep relationships, because someone who's going to spend time to really propose to you, those things don't happen a lot of times. So I think that people have to start taking those things a little more seriously, because when she goes through talking about this relationship, and I'm not arguing that this guy was for her, but the point is, she's not really saying anything substantive about how bad this guy was. The reality is that she said that she wasn't faithful in that 3-year relationship, and she just wanted to be in the streets. That's okay. I think it's better to just say that. But the reality is, of videos like hers and a lot of women, all the Claudia Jordans, the Melyssa Fords, the Lisa Rays, the Vivica Foxes, all the older queens, right? You guys need to start giving some relationship advice or life advice to the younger women. I think younger women look at you guys and they look for advice. I'm not saying you have to get on your knees and say I regret my whole life, but there has to be some level of lesson for younger women coming up, other than I'm a childless cat lady. This is not the road that girls need to be going down. Some people will end up on that road naturally. It's a natural progression of life, but they don't need to feel like go down that road without even any resistance.
I was on the covers of magazines, on your local newsstand. So everybody recognized me. And that was another source of pressure that I felt, being inside of this relationship rather than being free to explore all of my options. And so one day I was going through some drawers, folding laundry, placing clothes, in the drawers and such. And I found it. I found a box. And when I saw it, I said, please, God, don't let this be what I think it is. And I opened the box. And there it was. It was a ring. And the only thing that I could think was that it was an engagement ring. It sure as hell was not a promise ring. We were way beyond that. We were not in high school. I was not wearing this boy's varsity jacket. This was an engagement ring. And if I knew this man the way that I knew him, that proposal was going to be very public. And that terrified me. I didn't want to have to say no in front of our friends and family and publicly humiliate him. He did not deserve that. But I also could not see myself saying yes in front of everybody just to save face, and then later on have to break it to him like that this is not something that I was going to be able to go forward with.
What homeboy was trying to do was keep her off the streets. Women always have options. Melyssa Ford, she's still pretty, and in her day, she was a baddie. She was a video vixen. You know what I'm saying? And she had many choices. And I understand, maybe in her younger years, she felt like, man, I have a lot of options. All beautiful women have tons of options. The reality is you got to figure out, when do I get off the streets? Because sooner or later, what happened with her, she's, I'm not saying who she slept with, but a lot of people in the industry talk about stories about her living her life. It is what it is. But you start getting out here, you start racking up bodies, and then eventually, you go through 2 or 3 engagements, and next thing you know, you're in your 40s. You're freezing your eggs. You're at a crossroad where it's like you did want all those things, more than likely, kids and marriage. But then it comes to a play where it didn't happen, and then the defense comes to the play where it's like, well, I don't regret it. I love to be a cat lady and just have my pets and be at home. That's fine if that's where you're coming from. But again, I look at it and I say, well, what are the young girls coming up behind you guys that are in your 40s? What are you guys telling each other? Because, I think the men who are in my age range, men who are in their 40s, are reckless if they're telling younger guys, don't get married, and women are this and women are that. All these anti-family, anti-kid things, I don't think are good for young men either. And I'm trying to understand, how do we get to that place in culture where you got all these women who end up alone and older, and everybody, no one regrets anything. I don't understand that. I mean, the whole point of getting older is to derive levels of wisdom. And I think that on a human level, I don't see how we move forward without having family, without having children and family.
Society places an enormous amount of pressure on us to check certain boxes. The box of go to school and excel. You've got to pursue a career based on what you went to school for. And you've got to excel and become successful. And you have to have your 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, 15-year, 20-year plan, all while you're in your 20s. Get married, get the white picket fence, and have 2.3 kids. Never figured out the point situation when it came to the statistics, because, like, what's a third of a kid? But I digress on that. The problem with the boxes is that we never check in with ourselves. It is never, ever, ever our first thought as to, well, what is it that I actually want? I am now, welcoming into my circle a lot of women who checked all those boxes. And for all intents and purposes, a lot of the stuff really actually did not work out. Yes, they ended up with the children, but they ended up in sometimes a loveless, sometimes an abusive, and sometimes a marriage of convenience.
So now we get to the point. So this is what I'm saying. The reality is that there's never a guarantee when you're going to go through life to achieve and try to do certain things. So if you're going to go to school, there's no guarantee you're going to get a job. Right? If you get a job, there's no guarantee you're going to get a raise and be able to pay all your bills from that job. If you get married, there's no guarantee it's going to be perfect. But the purpose is you're going to have to work at whatever you do. So I think that's the crux of where I'm going to pause her right here and just really talk about that point. Because when you get married, or if you're going to try to have a family and have kids, it's all going to take work. And it's all going to take you to evolve and adjust, you know what I'm saying, and reevaluate yourself. It'll never be perfect. It'll never fall into a box. People feel like, well, why even get into anything? Because all the people I know who had kids and who are married, they're unhappy, this and this and that. And then the flip side of it is that are we saying that people who don't have kids and people who are alone and all of that are also happy? Loneliness is on at an all-time high, especially for older people and younger people, because everybody's sitting at home alone. Everybody's saying, I want to do this by myself, and I want to live just for me. I don't want to have to worry about anybody. And there's a lot of unhappiness on that side. So I'm not saying everybody should have the same life dynamic, but I think that as we get older, there has to be some level of wisdom. Life is short. I don't understand why people are like getting into their 40s and 50s and they're like, oh, now I'm going to explore and figure out myself. You only have so much time to really try to build something with somebody. By the time you're in your 40s and 50s and you're getting married for the first time, it's still not going to be perfect. Even if you meet somebody you think is perfect, you're going to be with somebody who has children and who has life experiences. So it's never going to be perfect. But I think that, again, I don't know if this is someone who doesn't have any children, because if she had a daughter who was 25 years younger than her, are you going to give your daughter the same advice? And that's why I always tell people, imagine that you had a child, a son or a daughter. What advice would you give them? Because the advice that you give them is the most honest, truthful, and selfless advice that you could give. But anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Crucial Combo.